Hi, I'm Chris. I listen to music, and today we're talking about my favorite records of 2023. You know how this works. I'm going to talk about some of my favorite albums and EPs from this year and tell you why I like them. But let's not dilly-dally, let's get into the first record. Billed as the new supergroup of post-punk, Mock Media consists of members from noise rock outfit Crack Cloud as well as genre buddies Pottery. And when you have a new supergroup come together, you expect something decadent and some bombastic type output. And while their new record Mock Media 2 doesn't reach any great heights, it pays homage to some of the great post-punk and proto-punk outfits before their time. This album basks on the sleeve influences from like Big Audio Dynamite and earlier Talking Heads type stuff, and at times it seems like they're trying to reconstruct these sounds brick by brick, albeit with new production technology. But you're still in for some really fun and splintery post-punk, one that feels almost held up by some rotten 2x4s. The production is super sparse and incredibly dirty, and matched with these tribal chantings of anxiety, loneliness, and paranoia, this record definitely hits it on the head of what it wants to be. Tracks like Get on the Ship and Follow Their Crime, to me, are the best examples of that ethos, and they don't take long to really lock you in this exotic, hypnotic groove. If you've been into parquetcore to, of course, Crack Cloud or Pottery, you need to check this out. It's an absolute blast. Split, with two L's, yes, two L's, have described themselves as general oddball art punk, which is just great. And their mishmash of punk, art pop, and electronica finds them in the same realm as bands as like Water From Your Eyes, Palm, and Feeble Little Horses. Oh no, just Feeble Little Horse, there's just one. And while some of those bands release records that I will talk about, I also want to talk about this Split record, because goddamn it's great. There's something emphatic about the 27-minute chaotic dissonance that the band has on their new record Infinite Hatch. And they never really spend too long on one idea, taking 12 tracks as kind of a bouncy house of anxiety. And it's taped together by these trading guitar licks and almost theatrical lyrical delivery. And while the record does stay in the loose guidelines of art pop, egg punk, whatever you want to call it, they love to go outside the boundaries as well. And this record really exceeds in its ability to kind of throw everything at the wall and somehow making it stick. Those plethora of creative choices kept me coming back for more. It reminded me of bands of like The Garden and Black Midi, so if you're into any of those, please check this record out. But yeah, there is something here that I really enjoyed. I don't know what it is, but it keeps calling to me. Blink-182 is back, baby, with Tom DeLonge at the helm for the first time since their 2013 EP Dogs Eating Dogs, I think? Which, side note, great release from the band. If you haven't checked it out, Boxing Days is a Christmas classic. However, this reunion came after a very tumultuous time for the band, specifically with Mark Hoppus getting diagnosed with cancer in 2021. But this seemed to be the main catalyst for Mark, Travis, and Tom to finally get back into the studio together, play some shows, and release what is their reunion record called One More Time. And yes, while this record does have many faults, I mean, it's a bunch of 40-year-olds doing teenage punk. What do you expect? Being such a lifelong fan myself, this record was everything I wanted and more. The band thankfully plays fan service on a lot of these tracks, harkening back to the punk thing that made them popular 20 plus years ago. Tracks like More Than You Know, Cut Me Off, and Dance With Me seem plucked straight from the 2000s, while Terrified is literally just a Boxcar Racer song, which I did not expect. But the emotional climax of the record comes with One More Time, which I gotta be honest, fucking bawled my eyes out to. Yes, it's insanely cheesy, but goddamn, it's three of my favorite boys making music together again. How can you not love this? And honestly, I think they're in their best form since Neighborhoods, maybe, and I love it. I'm so happy. Enjoy is the project of one Wyatt Shears, whose name may sound familiar if you're in the know. Him and his brother have this project called The Garden, and what The Garden is a goddamn mystery. It's lo-fi, punk rock, hip-hop, but they call it Vada Vada, so yeah. And with The Garden releasing their absolutely insanely named Horseshit on Route 66 at the end of 2022, 2023 was the year of the side projects. Wyatt's brother Fletcher also released his own album under his name Puzzle called The Rotting Opera. It was super weird, but I specifically wanted to talk about Wyatt's new release from Enjoy. It's called Exploited, and I think it's the standout release from them this year. In the past, Wyatt's influences with his project Enjoy have not been as varied as Puzzled, which is why I haven't been into him as much. However, with this release, Enjoy decided to go a completely different route, doing some bedroom punk with some 80s pop. It sounds a little like Hall & Oates at times, and the absolute tenacity that's exuded on this record is what kept it in my rotation. Wyatt's ability to craft these weird earworms around this slightly amplified sound is infectious, especially when it floats over these acoustic guitars and clanky synths that kind of fill out the sounds of this record. Overall, this record is an extremely tight 26 minutes of controlled bedlam, and it continues to enforce the Wyatt brothers as two powerhouse creatives in the world of alternative music. Just Friends have been circling around the pop-punk emo scene in California the last few years, going on to tinker with the funkier sides of rock after their 2015 Rock to the Rhythm release, and they became one of my favorites after their 2018 release Nothing But Love, which is just a powerhouse of a record. But after a somewhat disjointed release in 2022, the band decided to circle back and recenter themselves. And what we got from that was this year's release, Gusher, which I think is so much better than anything they've released in the last couple years. Building off of this big band funk rock music, they also have wonderful elements of power pop, emo, singer-songwriter, country sometimes too, and tracks like Circle Pit of Love is the closest thing the band will ever come to writing a disco track, and they somehow pull it off. But personally, Life I'm Living In is the highlight of the track. I think it's the perfect culmination of everything the band's been working up to. It's an extremely tight and anxiously driven outfit to just say, hey, life sucks, but fuck it, I got my friends. It's good. And that's what Just Friends does really great, is they just don't make you feel alone, give you a nice little hug, and tell you everything's gonna be all right. And this record made my list because it just felt like a warm blanket of joyous celebration that I just want to keep burying myself into. 2023 seemed to be a fantastic year to be a pseudo-hardcore band. Like Turnstile going on tour with Blink-182 finally playing their massive Glow On to stadiums of people. And of course we get a slew of new punk records from some of the most exciting artists out there. One that's been talked about the most is Military Gun. Main creative Ian Shelton decided to form the band during the throes of the pandemic, finally coming together in this year to release their debut, Life Under the Gun. This album dips its toes into the softer side of hardcore, with a lot of these power pop tendencies that just make some of the best hooks. But don't get it wrong, this record is absolutely brutal, both in subject matter and production. Filled with quick and punchy diatribes of anger and disappointment, Ian's lyricism loves to harken back to the anger of the youth style of 90s punk rock, albeit with 2020 sensibility. To me, this comfortability comes from a very new yet somehow familiar sound, and definitely shows why Military Gun has the chops to really make it far in this game, and why this record's been talked about by so many people. It's so great. After Paramore's immensely successful release This Is Why in earlier 2023, and don't worry, we'll get to it, to keep that momentum up, the band decided to effectively donate all their songs from that record to some of their favorite artists. They let them mix and remix and remaster and do whatever the hell they wanted to that song, and from that we got This Is Why. Just for starters, this record has like an Avengers level kind of collaboration from some of the biggest alternative artists of like ever, from Foles to Remy Wolf, to some of the biggest up-and-comers in the scene like the Linda Lindas and Wet Leg. And while there are some straight remixes like Zane Lowe from Beats One, the DJ, he does a great remix of Running Out of Time, some of the artists decide to just straight up cover the songs in their own style. Like back to Wet Leg, they did their own cover of Say Comme Ça, and oh my god, was this song written for them or what? This diverse and almost whiplashy kind of flow from track to track really allows each artist to stand out and show what they can do with a Paramore song. Also, before I forget, if you didn't want any remixes, there is a B-side tacked on at the end called Sanity, and of course it's great. It's more of that danceable crying from Haley & Co., but I do feel it would have fit a little bit better on After Laughter, but that's not a complaint at all. But regardless, This Is Why is a wonderful companion piece that caps off a wonderful and momentous year from the band, and is an absolute listen for any Paramore fan. Oh, the boys! Man, Boy Genius has had a hell of a year, haven't they? If you don't know, Boy Genius is mainly made up of three of the biggest singer-songwriters in the indie circuit over the last decade. Those three artists being Julian Baker, Lucy Dacus, and Phoebe Bridgers. And while Lucy and Julian have of course made massive headwind in their own solo careers, Phoebe Bridgers has made her own kind of world. Especially this year with Phoebe Bridgers opening for Taylor on her Errors tour and showing up on the Red re-release on a Vault Trek. But the three of them together have been quietly building their own ecosystem since the release of their EP back in 2018, I believe. But this year, the band solidified themselves as the figureheads of indie in the modern era with their record called The Record. And the sounds on the record are honestly a perfect synthesis of what all three of them do on their own, with the record flowing effortlessly between these 90s alt-rock sounds to Elliott Smith type sad boy stuff. And yes, my god, it's this record sad and gay. And while each three of the boys have their own moments to shine, I think the best is when they all just go full throttle on one song together. I'm looking at you, $20 Bill and Satanist. Yes, best tracks. This kind of Lilith Fair revival has been bubbling under the surface for the last couple years, especially with the popularity of artists like Maggie Rogers and Biba Doobie. But if there is an artist or a record to really bring back the rock sound into the popular vernacular, it's going to be Boy Genius. But yeah, super important record for just music in general. I love the boys.
King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard!
King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard is, in a word, colossal. Over the last 13 years of the band, they've been absolute workhorses, releasing 25 records in their time as a band. And in that time, they've done pretty much everything you can do as a psychedelic rock band, ranging from synths to thrash metal to an 1800s American Western storybook. And yes, I know I'm cheating a little bit putting these two records together because they are vastly different records, but let me tell you, they are Giz records and they are great. First off, released in June was the thrash metal record, and I want to get the name right, Petrodraconic Apocalypse, or Dawn of Eternal Night, an annihilation of planet Earth and the beginning of merciless damnation. Jesus. This record, which I'm just going to call PDA for short, is the spiritual successor to the band's 2019 record, Infest the Rat's Nest, as we find the band finally returning to the fan favorite thrash metal progressive rock sound. And oh my god, this record just doesn't stop for the 50 plus minutes of runtime, as it just melts your face with King Gizzard's amplified version of the sounds of like Motorhead, Metallica, and Slayer. And it all comes together to tell this absolutely terrifying story of some like Lovecraftian demon who's just destroying Earth. I don't know what they're on about anymore, but it's fun to listen to. But this like brutalist King Gizzard is absolutely welcome and always one of my favorites, and I'm so happy they revisited this sound. But later in the year, at the end of October, we got the Silver Accord, which is the yin to PDA's yang. And the Silver Accord finds the band finally diving headfirst into the electronica sounds they've been tinkering with on tracks like Cyboogie, and of course their wonderful Butterfly 3000, which was the softer sides of synths, and let me tell you, this thing is rough. Like, this thing is just so goddamn weird with all the bleeps and bloops and analog synths they have. It's just an absolute soundscape of minimalistic synthesizers. Like, just look at the list of the equipment Joey Walker used on this record. Like, oh my god. It would also behoove me to mention that Joey Walker probably spearheaded this album because of his project Bullet. He also released a record this year and explores the more harder drum and bass dubstep elements of electronica. If you're into that, please check it out. But while this record is super indulgent in its standard version, there is an extended version that is like 90 minutes long, and oh my god, do they indulge in those synths. They spend those 90 minutes just covering every single corner they can with the equipment they have on hand, and I honestly don't expect anything else from a Giz record anymore. But yeah, if you can believe it, King Gizzard released 2 more solid records in the year 2023, and they're probably gonna do it again next year. God, I love this band. Mac DeMarco is an oddity of a man, honestly. Having enjoyed basically underground pop star status over the last 10 years with his hit records 2 and Salad Days, he's now become the figurehead of this ever-present style of lo-fi bedroom recorded slacker rock stylings. In 2023 was a really weird year for him, having released another instrumental record at the beginning of the year, the more concise but also just as chill 5 Easy Hot Dogs. And also he somehow scored a TikTok hit from his 2017 track for the first time. No idea how he did that, but great track. But then in the middle of the year, we got One Wayne G from Mac DeMarco, which is one of his most unconventional releases. It's basically framed as a scratch pad or musical diary over the last couple of years, spanning almost 8 hours of music. And while this thing is massive and not really varied, it definitely gives a fantastic look into Mac's creative process. And honestly, anything you want from a Mac DeMarco record is in this collection of songs right here. You've got the jangled guitars, you got the synths that sound like they're constructed with dying double A's, and of course you got Mac's very heartfelt but also quite strange stream of consciousness lyricism. You want an example of that? Listen to She Wants the Sandwich. Like, what goes on in this man's head? But as a now longtime fan of Mac DeMarco, it's wonderful to see him playing around with his releases. And I really do think this record really solidifies Mac DeMarco's ever-present influence in the indie rock scene today. Next up! Model Act Trees, a Boston, Massachusetts based band that's been slinging it since 2016, has become one of the most talked about bands of the year. Having played around with their esoteric sound since that year, they've broken up, gotten back together, but finally have released this hell of a record called Dog's Body. And good God, is this record a force of nature. The cornerstone of this group's sound is some anxiously driven yet extremely dissonant post-punk, with this slight tinge of disjointed electronica that really holds this thing together in a very new way. Tracks like Crossing Guard and Mosquito like march along with this almost military-like consistency, and they're also not afraid to kind of bask in their own glory and jam out for a few moments. But then we have others like Divers and Sleepless, which love to bask in this white noise-esque composition, which allows the fantastically queer lyricism of Cole Hayden to really stand out. But Model Act Trees has this super boisterous and soulful energy that I think is going to keep them around for years to come. And honestly, if they keep this consistency up, I would not be shocked to see them up there with the likes of Black Midi and Black Country New Road as influential post-punk bands of the 2020s. So pay attention, they got something cool. If you don't know who Chris Farron is, let me just show you real quick.
Hello, it's me, Chris Farron, and I'm on my boat right now. I can't wait to play these shows for you. I'm traveling all the way from the United States of America to bring the cup to you.
Chris Chris Farren is a man of pure chaos, but also pure of heart, and honestly, it's because of that he's become one of the biggest figureheads in the DIY music scene over the last couple years. Having started as the front person of Florida's Fake Problems, he's went to go ahead and explore the bubblier sides of pop over the last couple years, but he's also stayed true to his punk roots, collaborating with best friend Jeff Rosenstock, specifically on their project Antarctical Vespucci, which honestly, great fucking band. And while Chris has always tried to restrain himself to what he can only perform himself, this record, Doomsinger, is the first time he's introduced a second companion on his record, one Frankie Impastato of Maxiel. She's playing drums and she's great, let me tell you. And this record's great. Having this newfound partner in crime, Chris has really tapped into something wonderful on this record. While it's of course filled with Chris's insanely catchy hooks, he's moving away from the synthy bedroom pop sound and moving full force into power pop. And while this is a sort of return to form for Chris, it has definitely injected him and Frankie with this newfound source of energy that's kept me coming back to this record. But yeah, honestly, this is a chronically online record for chronically online people who want to dance around and think about their mistakes while having an anxiety attack. It's great. Secret Life by Fred Again and Brian Eno was kind of the dark horse record I didn't know till it came out in May of this year. And this record kind of finds a crossroads between two sides of electronica, the old and the new, with Fred Again being one of the hottest and newest producers of the last couple years, and Brian Eno being the godfather of ambient electronica. And believe it or not, this record and collaboration is not by chance. These people have been working together since 2014, and Brian Eno has been a de facto mentor for Fred Again over his career. But bringing these two together got us Secret Life, which is absolutely depressing, honestly. And while Fred Again's glitch charm is all throughout this record, it really feels like a Brian Eno record with Fred as a feature. This record is 45 minutes of thick constructed droney walls, featuring the odd samples and freewheeling distortion that Fred is kind of known for. And all through that, you have Fred kind of crooning about, you know, sad boy white things that fits perfectly with this record's tone. But these two play off each other in such interesting ways that this had to go on my list for the year. I did a review of this record a couple months ago, and I said it was a sort of peanut butter and jelly situation, but I think in hindsight, it's not like that at all. It's kind of more like peanut butter and banana or peanut butter and honey. It shouldn't work, but my god, it does. That being said, a peanut butter and honey sandwich is pretty fucking good. 100 gecs are, for lack of a better term, an anomaly. Popping out of nowhere with their 2019 watershed record 1000 gecs, the duo of Laura Les and Dylan Brady have been leading the charge in introducing hyperpop to the grinder world of music. And oh my god, ever since that record, they have been climbing the charts, let me tell you. From releasing a remix record of 1000 gecs with Charlie XCX and Fall Out Boy as features, from a massive US tour in 2023 that included opening spots from 9 Inch Nails of all people. I mean, top 10 anime crossovers, am I right? But after a few delays, we finally got the full-length follow-up to 1000 gecs, aptly titled 10,000 gecs. And as the title implies, this is just the gecs doing what the gecs do best, just turned up a heck of a lot more. And even though all that chaotic production and lyricism is there, they still find ways to divert anyone's expectations. Like Billy Knows Jamie could have passed for a Limp Bizkit song with different production. And I still don't know what the hell Frog on the Floor is, like amphibian ska? But let's be honest, the thing that this band does best is crafting mind-numbing earworms that just get stuck in your head for years. Like the pre-chorus in Doritos and Fritos, come on, it's like one of the best hooks they've ever had. But in all honesty, it's great to see the band digging deeper and deeper into the oddity of their music, even as they become more popular. And it goes to show this band knows exactly what they're doing, and if you want a better example of that, just listen to this record. The three Texas boys who call themselves Waterparks have been doing something wonderful in the world of new pop punk. Breaking out in 2016 with their insanely catchy record Double Dare, the group's infectious blend of modern production and nostalgic songwriting has given them loads of fans to support their career. And having bopped around to multiple labels over the last couple of years, they finally found their destined home at Fueled by Ramen, having them release their newest record, Intellectual Property. And believe it or not, Intellectual Property might be the first concept record for the band. And while I can see this being the band's most thematically focused record, sonically they are all over the place. Using their boyish pop rock sound as a jumping off point, they seem to hit almost all aspects of alternative music in this modern era. Like this record goes from trap hop influences to hyper pop tinges to a Curtis Connor sample, like what? But honestly, that whiplash really works for this record as it kind of matches the emotional kind of back and forth that you feel with a breakup. But yeah, this record catapulted me back to high school in the best way. If you were a 2000s emo kid who listened to a little too much 303, please check this band out. They're great. before we get to the rest of the list, I want to talk about some of my favorite, well, 10 of them, 10 of my favorite EPs from this year. These aren't in any order like the rest of my list, I just wanted to share some of my favorite short releases from the year. And to kick things off, remember when I was talking about that hardcore renaissance that's been popping up with bands like Turnstile and Military Gun? Well, I can't talk about that without talking about Scowl, my god. I'll be honest, Scowl just kicks so much ass, there's no other way around it. Throughout the entire year, I kept coming back to the live performances posted by Hate56 on his YouTube channel, and mostly because of how fucking awesome Kate Moss is. She's the front person of Scowl, and my god is she a force of nature. That energy she exudes on stage is something I haven't seen from a front person in years. And the earworms these kids weave into this new and exciting realm of hardcore is just absolutely fantastic. Like, I cannot believe Shot Down and Opening Night are on this record. They are instant classics in my opinion. Honestly, I could gush about these kids all day. They are leading this renaissance in this sound, and I am so excited for them and so happy for their success. Moving on next is Sugar Pit, who in my mind is one of my favorite finds on TikTok all year. They found immense success with their song Customer Service, which you probably heard if you saw this video of him just wrecking a Walmart. And I'm so glad we have an artist like this blowing up on TikTok. Like, I'm a sucker for this anxiety-filled bastardization of post-punk. And this first release of his, Taskmaster, takes that sound and kind of stretches it in all directions like a ball of silly putty. It's brash, hilarious, entirely off-kilter, but such a strong first release from this brand new artist. Next up is Mega Mango, who is one of my favorite bands in the Philadelphia scene right now. They are the DIY brainchild of 4 Drexel students, much like Modern Baseball, but they're doing something entirely different with their brand of alternative rock. And this EP, Fun and Games, is filled with the most interesting and massive production in the DIY sphere. Like, I'm so shocked they made this all on their own. They self-describe their sound as fruitcore, which in my mind is like 2010s indie pop sensibilities, but with some instrumentation intelligence that is way beyond their years. If you're a fan of like Tame Impala or Two Door Cinema Club, you need to check these kids out because they're gonna have a hell of a 2024, let me tell you. Next up, we have a collaboration from both sides of the proverbial alternative pond, as jazz fusion collective Bad Bad Not Good takes their whack at some of the songs from Turnstile's 2020 record Glow On. And while on paper this absolutely shouldn't work, somehow it does. It's nothing new sonically for Bad Bad Not Good, but for Turnstile, it's a complete left turn. As Bad Bad Not Good takes the more soulful elements of Glow On, especially Brendan Yeat's wonderful vocals, and stretches them out to eternity. And let me tell you, Brandon could probably pull it off as a lounge singer in another world. Like, Alien Love Call was this bossa nova type thing that just works so well. As the kids say, I did not have this on my 2023 bingo card, but I'm so glad we got this collaboration, even if it's only 3 quick tracks. Moving on to my boys in Waukesha, who just had one of the best debut years of any Philadelphia band I've seen. I got to know this group a little bit after I was fortunate enough to take some press photos for them earlier in the year. Cute photo montage. But since then, I've been keeping tabs on them, and they've become a force to reckon with in the city of Philadelphia. In their first EP, Between the Teeth, brings a familiar blues and garage sound to the overall post-punk rock world. But vocalist Shane Morgan just soars over this group with unbelievable energy, which is creating just some chemistry I haven't seen in a good little bit. The 20 minutes that you spend with this group in this EP is kind of like a backyard hangout during a get-together that's just about to pop off. And I think Waukesha are definitely on the crux of throwing one of the biggest parties of the year. Keep an eye on them. Okay, next up we have the wonderful release from Taxi Girls called Coming Up Roses. And for me, it takes something really special for an old school punk record to really hit me somewhere. But Taxi Girls are doing something special. This newest EP has all the telltale signs of a vintage coded release. Like with these gigantic power pop type anthems that you would find from classic bands like the Ramones. But something about the execution of this record from these 3 Canadian women is something sublime. Whether it's coming from the added tinges of modernism, whether that be the more processed drums or clearer production, or if it's coming from their lyrical synthesis that reminds me of bands like Veruca Salt and Green Day, it's just checking all the boxes for me. And given this is yet another debut release from a brand new band, I'm so excited where 2024 brings this group. I think they're doing everything right to make themselves a home in the punk rock scene. Next up, we have a companion piece to Geese's 3D Country, aptly titled 4D Country. And if you enjoyed the more slower and soulful cuts from that record, this EP is going to be right up your alley. The band still keeps up their 70s revival shtick on tracks like Killing My Borrowed Time. However, they are already spicing things up, adding a little bossa nova incorporation in there. I don't know what it is with bossa nova this year. It's coming back. In Art of War is a fun little synthy freakout that seems to be the calmer cousin of 2122, the lead track from 3D Country. But yeah, this is a nice little release that put a wonderful little bow on the year that Geese had. I love more Geese. Give me more Geese. All right, next up we got another debut release, one one that is from Slap Rash called Catherine Special. And Slap Rash is occupying this new corner of punk rock, one that's ditching the guitars altogether, focusing on bass, drums, and minimalistic synths. But for only being a duo, the sparseness of their instrumentation really shines through, allowing the brother and sister pair to really show how great their chemistry is. From person Amelia Lloyd delivers in this wonderful swag that reminds me of artists like Kim Gordon from Sonic Youth, a force that really seems harsh to the ears but is also quite soothing to the brain. And seeing as this band really grew their chops as a live band, I'm happy they were able to go ahead and transfer that energy on tape and, as the kids say, rock out. And with only being 14 minutes, this quick little release really gives a nice teaser of where this band is going and how exciting their 2024 is probably going to be. Next up from Philadelphia, we have Full Body 2, who's been hunkered down in their basement spitting out release after release since the end of 2020. But with the band's new release Infinity Signature, we finally have a proper release that isn't a split or a single. And it gives the group the space to explore their brand of synthwave infused indie rock freakouts. This record is simultaneously both smooth and rough at times, I don't know how, as it fills its time with these sultry vocals and absolute massive synth walls with an aesthetic that can only describe as hyper-realistic. This EP's assault on the senses is one I did not experience with any other release this year, but a release that is almost parasitic in the way it just buried into my head and stood there. It's chaotic yet controlled, insane yet understandable, and with it being one of the most individualistic releases of the year, you're just gonna have to dive headfirst in and let me know what you think. It is crazy. And finally, let's round out this EP list with the wonderful dream pop legends Beach House and their wonderful Become EP. If you haven't been keeping tabs on Beach House, they're still recovering from their massive release in 2020 and 2021 called Once Twice Melody, but they still found some time to get together a handful of tracks and release it under this EP. From person Victoria Legrand said of this record, and hold on, I want to get this quote right, "Not really where we the band are currently going, but it's definitely somewhere we have been." So the band went back and treaded some Sonic water from their old records like Teen Dream and Self-Titled, but these tracks still have the snazz and pizzazz that you would find on Once Twice Melody and the newer Beach House records. But it's still filled with all the wonderful gothic melodies this band has been known for, so if you're into that, definitely check out this EP, you will not be disappointed. Anyways, back to the records! Home Is Where have been crafting their own little world of these emo-tinged folk punk anthems since 2019, and ever since, they've been one of my favorite bands. With them really exploding into the scene with their 2021 record, I Became Birds. And it is a whirlpool of a record with its esoteric combination of rock, country, and just existentialism. After releasing a split with Record Setter last year, the band hopped back into the studio with producer Jack Shirley and put out one of their best efforts, The Wailer. And if you want a great deep dive into the process of this record from the band themselves, I was lucky enough to interview Tilly and Brandon a couple months ago. Please check it out. But I haven't given my full thoughts on The Wailer as a whole, and oh my god, what a cannon of a record. This record is sort of billed as a concept record from the perspective of someone who grew up in the wake and the subsequent trauma of September 11th. And the album is kind of presented of a diary from someone who is growing up in a country with this uber nationalistic response. And given the age of this group and the fact that they were surrounded by a lot of this in their home state of Florida, the perspective provided on this record is one of anger, confusion, and just plain bewilderment. It seems like the group really took the last year to solidify their sound, as a lot of their influences are weaved into the band almost effortlessly. Like Everyday Feels Like 9/11 screams Kings of Leon, and Yes Yes reminds me of a Sheryl Crow song. I don't know why, but it does. But when you marry all of these elements together, you get a gut punch of a record. Its honesty and bluntness is not just jarring, but brings over a very necessary perspective from an almost invisible generation. One that grew up with this peripheral trauma from an event they never really experienced. But overall, this record's not just a tentpole release for the band, but one for the genre, the punk genre overall, one that I think that will be revisited with such fondness in years to come. Oh, Paramore, you've been through the ringer, haven't you? Shifting not only sonically over the last 20 years, but trading band members in and out because of, let's just say, personal problems. But band leader and vocalist Hayley Williams has just kept on keeping on, continuing to make wonderful records with the now only consistent member of the band, Taylor York. However, they have been more stable since the release of 2017's After Laughter, finally bringing back drummer Josh Farrow into the mix. No, Zach, not Josh. Ooh. But since then, Paramore has deviated from their pop rock emo sound found on their more classic records and has moved into a very danceable yet extremely sad sound. And with the band spending the last 6 years on other projects, most notably Hayley Williams' solo records in 2020 and 2021, the group finally made the miraculous return this year with This Is Why, and whoa, holy crap. Like, just from the opening blast of the title track, we know this band is on some new shit. Like, This Is Why, The News, Running Out of Time, and Say Come Saw is probably the best run of tracks Paramore's ever put out. Blending dance, punk, rock, disco, and a little bit of their own secret sauce to create one of my my favorite run of tracks of the year. And with this being another post-pandemic record, Haley's head seems to be a little more away from the internal lyrics that she's been known for writing, deciding to focus on a centered theme of a grander world that one person really can't change on their own. In short, Paramore has grown up, and that undeniable anxiety that comes with growing up is all throughout this record. And being a 20-something adult in this world, I can't tell you how much all of this clicked with me. And personally, I think with this and the last record, After Laughter, Paramore has solidified themselves as legends, and is one of those bands that somehow made it out of the 2000s emo pop radio scene with their integrity still intact, and oh my god, is it thriving. Boy, I love this band. There's not much else I can say. The Murlocs are an Australian-based group causing out this blue-tinged psychedelic sound that's almost all of their own. And while they have carved out their own cultish success over the last decade or so, a lot of their success is contributed to the fact that two of the members, Ambrose Kenny Smith and Cook Craig, are in the band King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, who is probably the biggest band in Australia right now. And while this band is separate from King Gizzard, their influences bleed into one another. I kind of look at the Murlocs as the alternative universe where right after 12 Bar Blues, King Gizzard released Fishing for Fishies and just kept on that track. Focusing on a more soulful, slower side of the blues 60s boy band type sound, with influences from like the Beatles and George Harrison and the Byrds just all over this record. Ambrose has nearly perfected his demented crooning voice on this record, making him almost the perfect vessel to spew these words of societal issues from a millennial perspective. And his almost effortless rasp is comforting yet powerful as like a Melbourne street Jesus. Tracks like Common Sense Civilian and Centennial Perspective are almost perfect ethoses of what they're trying to accomplish. And this infectious buoyancy and jauntiness of the band is what kept me coming back to this record. Personally, I think this is one of the best collection and run of tracks ever collected by the Murlocs. And even though some of the records like Young Blindness are untouchable in my mind, this is still one of their best records. Who is Glosser? Well, they're a pop duo from the Washington, D.C. area. They've been releasing stuff since around 2020, 2021, and they're some of the best musicians I know personally. So a quick background with my relationship with the band. I got to meet them around the throes of the pandemic, I think early 2021. And since then, I've been working closely with them for the last 3 years, helping to release their records, making art, taking photos, running socials, anything they need. But let me tell you, their music is all them. I have nothing to do with it, and God knows you don't want me to. So I thought it was okay to include their debut record Downer, because oh my god, what a release this is. Building off of the blocks made by bands like Beach House and Phantom Planet, Glosser loves to find their comfortability in a lot of the hazier and moodier sides of those two projects. And while their 2021 self-titled EP spent a lot of time paying homage specifically to Beach House's dream pop sound, the band's debut record Downer finds them becoming a true pop duo, putting a spin on some of the genre's most tried and true staples. Tracks like Monsoon and The Artist take that dizziness and push it to its full pop potential, swimming effortlessly from the record's warm pull type of production produced by Corbin Sheehan. Oh my god, and let me tell you, vocalist and songwriter Riley Fanning has such an act for storytelling, weaving you through these luscious tales of heartbreak and loneliness, and with vocals that honestly give Lana Del Rey a run for her money. Tracks like Pendulum and Forever I think are perfect examples of that. Glosser are going to be, in my mind, one of those bands you wish you got into before they hit it big, so check them out now before they do. Also, I wouldn't be a good friend and a hype man if I didn't mention they're re-releasing the record with some extra tracks in January 2024, so check it out. But anyways, yeah, Glosser is good. Moving on. Fall Out Boy has been a staple of alternative and pop music radio. Pretty much they've been everywhere since the early 2000s. And with the unbelievable talent of the writing composition duo of bassist Pete Wentz and singer Patrick Stump, and along with guitarist Joe Troman and drummer Andy Hurley, they've been pumping out some of the most massive modern rock hits of the era, like Thanks for the Memories and Sugar We're Going Down. But since the 2010s, the band has been trying to figure out their footing in a post-rock pop-forward world. Some to pretty good effect like Save Rock and Roll and a handful of tracks on American Beauty and American Psycho, and then sometimes to absolutely disastrous effects, like I will not talk about Mania, sorry. But after Mania, the band went back to the drawing board, decided to pick up their instruments again, and released one of their best records, So Much for Stardust. And from the opener and first single, Love from the Other Side, the band finally shows us that they're not pushing away from their roots anymore. Finally and fully returning to this big arena type emo rock sound since, oh my god, Infinity on High maybe? And that now vintage sound is being married back into what Fall Out Boy has been doing the last couple of years, and it's done with so much more gusto. Tracks like Hold Me Like a Grudge and Fake Out are the best examples of that in my opinion, mixing their unmissable hooks with the larger, poppier production that they've been working towards since Folia Do. And also, the band itself sounds so much better than they have in years, and given I've seen a lot of talk about this being such a collaborative type of record, it's not shocking to see why it sounds like this. If you haven't guessed by now, Fall Out Boy has been one of my favorite bands, if not my favorite band since ever, and this pseudo return to form is everything I wanted from this band and more moving forward, and I hope they continue on this path, because God, I love this. Two of the biggest forces in alternative hop today, Danny Brown and JPEG Mafia, have made loads of Reddit fans happy, teaming up on their collaborative effort, Scaring the Hose. As both of them have been enjoying their own immense success with their mix of off-kilter yet extremely jarring production and lyricism. And yes, this is the best named record of the year, there's no doubt about it. While on paper, Danny Brown has enjoyed more commercial success over the last 10 years, JPEG Mafia has become one of my favorite artists over the last couple of years, creating some of the most individualistic music I've ever heard. Like, there's really no way to describe what they do outside of being bombastic, so when they announced they were collaborating on a record, we were expecting nothing but that. And hot damn, we got that and more! Structured almost like a greatest hits record, the band spends the entire record filling every nook and cranny with their insanity. And as Peggy is helming the production for all of these tracks, it's not shocking to see why that is. He brings his trademark glitch and drum and bass samples, of course, but it is turned up to 11. You'll find samples ranging from P. Diddy to like a Japanese Nintendo commercial, I think? And unsurprisingly, Danny and Peggy just trade off of each other so effortlessly, as Danny Brown's Gen Z Cypress Hill type flow pairs perfectly with JPEG Mafia's aggressive growl. Each track ranges from the absolute surreal to the blatantly honest, and each shift in tone keeps you on your toes to make what I think is some of the densest hip-hop ever created this year. Let's just be blessed that 1, we live in a world with these two artists, 2, they actually collabed, and 3, it worked out so goddamn well. Coming out of the woodworks of Brooklyn, New York, the band Geese seemed to be of this time, yet of a time long ago. And 3D Country is the band's second effort, most notably being produced by James Ford, who has been known for helming up the Arctic Monkeys record since Favorite Worst Nightmare. And from this record, the band is shot into the stratosphere of up-and-coming rock bands, even scoring opening slots for Greta Van Fleet and King Gizzard of the Lizard Wizard of all people. And also, these kids are like 20, which is just like absolutely insane. But yeah, it's not hard to see why 3D Country is one of the best records of the year. With this band somehow finding this wonderful middle ground between post-punk, 70s glam rock, and something all of the band's own. Vocalist Cameron Winter's powerful growl is something only he can do, and in my mind is one of the best performances from a vocalist since The Strokes' This Is It. Yeah, I'm going there. And let me tell you, this band gives him such a solid ground to stand on. Just the run of the first 3 tracks from 2122 to Cowboy Nudes is my favorite run of tracks of the year, bouncing effortlessly from chaos to pure creation to back again in some of the best 10 minutes of rock this year. And yes, this band is extremely eclectic, with influences ranging in from David Bowie to Parquet Courts to like Gloria Gaynor. But they maintain a sense of insane consistency and togetherness throughout, something a band of that chemistry and caliber can only do on their own. Just everything about this record from end to end hit me at some sort of way at different points during this year, and it is not shocked to see why Geese is becoming one of the most talked about rock bands right now, and one I will be keeping a close eye on. Water From Your Eyes are a pair of New York music journeymen who have been creating their own take on bastardized pop since 2017. And with their insane tracks and consistent release schedule, they've been able to make their name for themselves in the Brooklyn art pop scene with their handful of records and cover albums. And having jumped from label to label since their inception, they finally found their proverbial home on Matador Records, who had a hell of a year in their own right, releasing records from King Cruel, Queens of the Stone Age, and Yola Tango. But Water From Your Eyes, I think, has gotten the most critical reception, landing on a bunch of year-end lists, and for good reason too, because their new record, Everybody's Crushed, is a damn good record. I guess this band could be labeled as experimental pop, but good lord, does that not encapsulate the individualistic sound of this band. With it being anchored by frontperson Rachel Brown's extremely spunky yet angelic delivery, the absolute instrumental chaos that is on this record is what made it as interesting as it is. The whiplash of this group's eclectic tastes range from these noise pop guitar-centered drones on tracks like True Life and Barley, to these spacious, almost underwater synth ballads on tracks like 14 and Out There. The other half of the duo, Nate Amos, handled production and composition for a majority of this record, and these taping together of dissonant landscape with this very dense instrumentation makes for one of my favorite production styles of any artist today. Like, I would love to hear him get on a Carly Rae Jepsen or Dua Lipa track. Imagine what could happen. But also, I don't want to discount from the fact of how goofy this band is, and in a good way. Like, Buy My Product is a fantastic punchy middle finger to capitalism from the lens of someone who's chronically online, such as myself. So it's not surprising that this record just dug itself into my brain and stayed there for a majority of the year. And overall, while this band has been slinging it for the last 6+ years, I really feel like they're just getting started with this record. And with them collaborating with the likes of bands like Interpol, it seems like people are starting to pay attention, which is fucking fantastic. There are two things that are certain to happen each year. You'll pay your taxes, and Jeff Rosenstock's going to release one of the best records of the year. Jeff Rosenstock, if you don't know who that is, has been sort of the godfather of DIY punk for the last 20 years, slingshotting to infamy initially with his bands The Arrogant Sons of Bitches and Bomb the Music Industry. But since 2015, Jeff Rosenstock has been releasing a slew of amazing punk records under his own name, becoming the new de facto conductor of this new genre of very anthemic punk tracks. And honestly, the 5 releases he's had under his belt since becoming a solo artist have been some of the most critically claimed and consistent releases from any modern artist. As Jeff spent 2023 not only composing a lot of music for the Cartoon Network show Craig of the Creek, but also releasing his bombastic 6th studio album, Hell Mode. And like any Jeff record, his usual cast of characters are back to bring his vision to life, with Jack Shirley of course producing and bringing in his friends to collaborate, ranging from Scotttoon Network to Laura Stevenson and Chris Farron. And unsurprisingly, Jeff has released yet another banger, with Hell Mode being another tight selection of the cynicism Jeff's been honing since the beginning of his solo career. And with this being his first proper release written since the pandemic hit in 2020, not discounting his Dump 2020 series, this record felt like a bit of a state of the Jeff with him fleshing out his anger over the last couple years. You can definitely see that best executed in the tracks Head and I Wanna Be Wrong. And while tracks like Liked You Better and 3 Summers contain some of the best hooks he's ever written, it still makes me want to sit him down and ask if he's okay. And same with slower tracks like Hell Mode, it really shows Jeff's ability to succinctly communicate a spiraling mental state. But this is everything I want from Jeff and more, and I don't know how he does this, but he just continues to release some of the best records I've ever heard. But finally, we've reached the end of this list, and my number 1 record of 2023 is MS Paint, in my mind, have had one of the best introductory years of any punk band in recent history. Tricking in from the outskirts of Hattiesburg, Alabama, this band's instrumental composition is extremely massive given the instrumentals at their disposal, because they've elected to not use any guitar, only using bass, drums, and minimalistic synths. But the sound this band was able to create is something that is immediately intriguing, and also something that bands sometimes take years to find. It certainly doesn't hurt that every single member of this band has been slinging it in other hardcore bands for the last couple of years, but this group, and by extension their debut record Post American, is every single member firing at all cylinders. So what made this my favorite record of the year? Well, in short, it checked off all the boxes I needed for a full length. First off, the overall sound of this band is dense, brash, yet extremely upbeat. From the record's opener, Information, you just want to stop what you're doing and open up a goddamn pit. And lyrically, frontperson DD, who is just the perfect name for this man, just absolutely commands the microphone. But his powerful delivery of intelligent disappointment with the world and the system around today just makes you at the very least want to egg a cop car. But him, along with the rest of the other members, are able to contribute some of the best hooks I've ever heard on a record. I don't want to talk about Information again, but goddamn, that bass lick is something else. And songs like Hardwired, Acid, and Think It Through are just absolute barn burners. I can't believe this is the band's first record. Its subjectivity and perspective seemed to just mirror a lot of my thoughts throughout the year, and because of that, it just kept coming up in my rotation. Coupling that from some of the best instrumentation I've heard from a punk band, this is my favorite record of the year and my favorite band of the year. And with the band already lining up a completely massive 2024, I can't wait to see what this band continues to do. But yeah, those are all my favorite records of the year. I hope you liked it. Did you like any of those records? Did you not? Did I miss any of them? Please let me know. And if you want to check out some of my favorite releases from these records, EPs, and some singles I didn't talk about, please check out my playlist, link in the bio. But yeah, I think that's it. Thanks for a wonderful 2023. I'll see you next year.